We're recording.
So, Dr. John Waterhouse, will you pray us in, please?
Oh, I'd be delighted to do that. So knowing that the presence and the power of the One is right here, right now, wherever we are, wherever our listeners and viewers are, knowing that that presence is absolute and complete, I know that all is well, and that this time together is useful and productive and informative and does exactly what it is intended to do. And knowing that that is so, I simply relax into the presence, knowing that all is in perfect order, because that's the nature of the divine. And letting that be so, I let it be in gratitude and love, and so it is.
And so it is. Thank you, Dr. John.
You're welcome.
So, hi, I'm Reverend Karen Fry. I am actually the chair of the Nominating Council for Centers for Spiritual Living. And we have a new idea, the Nominating Council, on how we can help each person understand about what positions are up for election in this particular upcoming election, February 2018. So I will be interviewing, or actually at one point I'm going to be interviewed myself, but I'm going to be interviewing people from the various councils, and I thought, why not start with Dr. John Waterhouse, who has been our field leader, or what it is now known as the field leader, in that going forward since the integration. And that position is up for election in February 2018. So I'm going to be asking Dr. John some questions, and this will give anyone watching or listening some information about the position, and perhaps inspire you or someone you know to run for this position and to be elected in February 2018. So, Dr. John, if you think about the position of field leaders, how much time is required to truly fulfill the expectation of the position? I know it's a half-time position, quote, part-time position, but how much time do you feel is truly required to fulfill the expectations of the position?
Well, boy, you're starting right with one of the tough ones, because it does say in the ODM that the field leader is a part-time position. I've attempted to limit my office hours. I actually tried this, limiting my office hours to 5 hours, 4 days a week, so that it would be a half-time position. And I have failed miserably, because our organization does not run on 5 hours, 4 days a week. It's going all the time. So I've just kind of held on and stayed with it, and made it a point not to keep my hours, because that would just frustrate me, and just do the job. So, but to say that it is a 20-hour-a-week position is unrealistic. It's more than that. And
okay.
Anything, one of the things about our organization is that it's kind of our nature to redefine things ongoingly, infinitely, it seems at times. And the field leader position is certainly in that possibility again. So not that I have anything to report that's substantive, it's just the beginning of conversations, but we're always looking at how to best utilize all of the positions within our organization, and this is one of the key positions, so it's being looked at again, not so much for me, but for who will take this position once I'm complete with it.
Sure.
Let's talk about you may have asked me a different question about travel, but travel certainly fits into this. And to give you an example of travel schedules, I was actually on the road 3 out of 4 weeks in July.
3 out of 4 weeks in July. And is that a typical month for you? Or
well, to compare, August I'm only going to be gone 1 week, and September I'll be gone 2 weeks. So, and then it changes again in October, and summer is a busier time, but with travels to Golden to meet with staff and to work directly with staff on a number of occasions, it's a lot of travel. And I'll even say that I have a budget for my travel, and that I pretty much have used that up by the end of July. So the rest of the travel I'll be doing for the rest of the year really comes out of my pocket. So that's the truth. You wanted the truth. That's what's going on. Okay.
Very good. Well, that was one of my questions about travel, so thank you for handling that. So, so what do you understand now because, you know, it's the now moment and going forward. What do you understand now is the role of the field leader to be? What are the primary tasks, responsibilities, and opportunities?
Well, when, you know, I was never elected field leader.
Right.
I was elected twice as president, and when the leadership decided we weren't going to have a president anymore, we created this position, field leader, and I was pretty much appointed to it. So that's how this thing has begun. The roles are very well delineated in the ODM. It says straight out exactly what the position is, and I tell you what, I've got it in front of me. Let me read you a little bit of what it says in our ODM in section 10.9 about the field leader. The field leader provides vision and leadership for the organization and is the preeminent voice, face, and spokesperson for member communities in their relationship with the organization. I would say in relationship with the administration, because we're all part of the organization. The field leader is an elected presence at the highest level of organizational affairs and is directly accountable to the organization, leadership council, and member communities. The field leader is primarily focused on member communities and their relationships with the organization. And that's true. And I have ecclesiastical duties around that. I have administrative duties around that. And really creating that bridge between all of our about 400 member communities and our administration in Golden is my work. And the key thing that I made the point of when we created this position is that we must have field representation in the daily activities of our organization. No, the people that work at home office are wonderful people. They're good people, but they have taken on the perspective of home office. You have to. It's not a wrong thing. It's just what happens. So my job is to come in and always bring present the view of the field. Not that we all in the field agree on everything, but we have a different perspective because we're out here in the world doing the work. They're doing their important work at home office, but that needs to be represented. So I think that's one of the most important things that the field leader does, especially in all these areas where I get involved and serve. So that's a big piece of the puzzle. Members of the Leadership Council, the other members for the most part, and we'll leave Dr. Ken out of this, but they are the Leadership Council that meets once a month or perhaps more often if necessary, but they meet and have their objectives and their intentions set forth. They're not into the minutia of the day-to-day. And that's where the field leader has an influence and has some oversight responsibilities that the Leadership Council and from their perspective don't. And I think that's important.
Okay, great. Awesome. So then continuing on, how does the field leader, one, serve CSL? What is the relationship to the spiritual leader, the CSL staff, and the Leadership Council? So maybe, you know, you expand a little bit from what you already said.
Well, why don't I just go through the tasks that are my responsibilities within the organization. Okay. First of all, I'm a member of the Leadership Council, and I'm a full participating member. I don't just show up and let them do the work. I'm engaged in every conversation and every activity that the Leadership Council does. I also facilitate what's called the executive team. And the executive team is the spiritual leader, the executive director, the field leader, and the chair of the Leadership Council. Okay. I facilitate that because that's just where we started. Our very first meeting 5.5 years ago. Who's going to lead this? Okay, I'll lead it. And so I have, and not that these other people can't. They couldn't a heartbeat. But that's been my job, to facilitate a Monday meeting. Every Monday, the executive team meets. And we're kind of somewhere in between what the Leadership Council does and what the staff does, in that we talk about the hot issues, the topics that are happening in the office, staff, concerns with specific communities, anything that's going on, even some of the activities that are being planned for the Leadership Council. We work as a team to talk about them and to help support one another in moving forward with whatever's on our plate at the time. So that's the work of the executive team. One unique job that I have is that I'm the keeper of the master list of committees, which may not sound like much, but in our organization right now we have 54 councils, commissions, committees, and teams, and over 400 volunteer service and elected positions on those different bodies. And that's a big part of who we are. That means to me, we have a staff of a little over 30, and we've got 400 volunteer positions that I know of, and we've got a couple new committees that are being formed right now. So that's consistently growing in working in the areas of our organization that need attention. We are pretty much a volunteer organization with a support staff. So it's not that I control that list, but I try to keep it as accurate as I can. I tell the council every time I provide them with an updated list that this is as accurate as it can be at any particular moment, because people drop off a committee and come on a committee almost daily. But we know that we've got a lot of people doing a lot of work, and it's important to who we are as an international organization. Beyond that, I chair the Affiliation Review Committee, which is a really important committee in our organization. It reviews the application of any community that wants to be affiliated with us, that wants to become a member community. So we look at centers, and we still have some churches, and we have teaching chapters, we have focused ministries. And one of the things that I actually brought into this mix that was voted on several years ago is called virtual ministries. Realizing that more and more people are going to find their spiritual connection online, and that we really need to have a support mechanism for those communities that are developed online, that are led by someone who creates a website or a live streaming or whatever they're doing, so that they can support one another, and we can move forward consciously about how we're being presented online, rather than let that just be coming from all directions. So I think that's an important part of how we are organizing ourselves. So the Affiliation Review Committee is really a detailed focused committee where the members really go into the details of, does this community have all the elements necessary to come in and to be successful? We look at their business plan and their budgets and their plans for creating community. And some of them are existing communities from other places that are coming in. Some of them are startups, but that work is very important. We want every group that comes in to be successful. So we put a lot of time and effort into that. I also work very closely with the entire staff in licensing and credentialing, and they're doing amazing work. Dr. Jane and her staff deal with all the affiliations, all of the licenses for practitioners and ministers, all the ordinations for ministers, and beyond that, Dr. Jane is very involved with the ethics and professionalism department, which is interesting. I have oversight over that, but I keep a little distance from that so that I am not influenced until they're ready for me to get involved. And that's really important. When we have ethical issues with communities or ministers or practitioners, we have to handle that very consciously. And it's important for the communities, it's important for the individuals, and we do everything we can to resolve those kinds of issues in a way that serves everyone. So that's a very, very important part of what we do, and I have oversight responsibility for ethics and professionalism. And an interesting thing about that, it's called a department, but it's entirely volunteers. They don't have an office in Golden, but we wanted to elevate that to the level of saying this group of support ministers and practitioners that work in our ethics and professionalism department are dedicated to great outcomes for everyone. And that's just been really important. I sit on the Minister and Practitioner Licensing Committee, and that's the committee that looks at licenses for anyone who wants to affiliate as a minister or a practitioner with us. And that is an important part of what we do, because we really do have people that come in and say, I believe in what you're doing and I want to be a part of it. Some of them are already have a relationship with a single community, and we have standards for that, and we have to review all that and interview and such as that. And that's an important piece of what we do. I participate on the Minister Council. I'm not elected to the Minister Council, but I attend all their meetings and work with them to make sure that we support our ministers in the very best way possible. In so doing, in a joyous way, I've been wrangled into hosting the upcoming ministers gathering in Asheville. So Barbara and I and our community will be hosting looks like about 150 ministers. That's not part of my job description, but it's ended up being something that I was asked to do. And of course, I love my colleagues, and I'm very excited to have so many of them come here. So that's a piece of the puzzle, working with the Minister Council. I always have oversight responsibility with the awards committee, which you might think was not much all that important, just kind of, you know, glitziness, but it's not. Acknowledging the excellence in our organization, I think, is incredibly important to us, and that we see the best of us when we choose communities and individuals to receive acknowledgement from our organization. And the awards committee does great work. I also work very closely with the regional support coordinators, and I also serve on the education committee, and those are big tasks as well. The other areas of oversight that I have are working with the practitioner council, the practitioner representatives, the member council, the chaplaincy committee, and the Phoenix Bridge committee. And that pretty much rounds out the things that I do. Very nicely said in the ODM, but those are the pieces of the puzzle.
Well, no, thank goodness you don't keep up with your hours, Dr. John. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, that actually is, that can give someone a very good insight as to all the things that you're managing, being involved in, and are responsible for, quite honestly. So great. Well, so if you think about this and knowing how you've been, you know, like you said, now we're talking about the future of the field leader position because you weren't elected into that, but knowing the direction and being on the leadership council, et cetera, what do you think are the most important qualities and skills that the field leader needs to bring to this position?
Oh, what a good question.
And by the way, for anyone that is interested in this position, there are minimum requirements. You have to be ordained. What is it, 5 or 7 years? 7 years. So you have to at least have been ordained at least 7 years. There's other qualifications, but so outside of that, what do you think are the most important quality and skills that the person needs to come with?
Well, I would say certainly patience, being able to forgive, because things don't always work out like you imagine. You got to be compassionate. You've got to have perseverance and stay with it until you get the outcome that you want. Things don't just, I mean, we know how to manifest as religious scientists, but you have to stay with it, especially when there's so many moving parts. So that's a big part of what it is. And you've always got to have a big picture as to what our role as an organization, as a spiritual movement is in the world. And I think under every circumstance, those are the most important things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. So what have you accomplished in the field that you're proud of, Dr. John?
Well, you know, most of my time in elected office, I was the president. And just to speak to that, because it's kind of the forerunner of this field leader position, I ran for president because I wanted to see it through that our organization held together. We were apart for over 50 years, and it was not an easy task to bring two organizations, even though the philosophy that we believed in was exactly the same. Organizationally, we were very different. And we were told it was impossible, yet we did come together, and we cut some corners coming together. And so there was a lot of work to do once we were one organization. And to me, the most important thing that I have accomplished in being in elected office is being here to make sure we stay together. And there was talk early on about, oh, no, it's going to break apart again. And I think we've gone over that hump. I think we see ourselves as one organization. We're moving forward as one organization. We'll face our challenges as one organization, and probably in a generation, we'll forget what those two things were and simply be who we are, loving the science of mind and living by those principles. So that, I think, is the most important thing. Getting down into the specifics of what I've been involved in, I think one of the most interesting ideas I had was the spiritual Spiritual Living Circles program, which brought thousands of people, or continues to bring thousands of people together in small groups to discuss spiritual principles. We needed something outside of our known structure of centers and teaching chapters and focus ministries, something that was a little bit less structured, a little bit less requiring credentials, where people would just sit around and talk, and that we could feed them resources to do that. And I think that was an important thing that we accomplished in this time. I'm still hopeful that that's going to remain an important part of Centers for Spiritual Living after I'm gone. We'll see. Right now, something that I'm working on that I think will be important to all of our field organization is the restructure of our licensing and credentialing department, with a kind of restructuring of our regional support coordinator program. And what I'm calling that, it's my working title right now, it's not official yet, but we're calling that the Department of Field Support. And it is a department that answers directly to the field leader. And it includes, it is made up right now of the regional support coordinators. When you look at an organizational outlay of who we are and how we're structured, the RSCs kind of sit over in the corner without having, they've got Dr. Casey, God bless him, but beyond that, not much fitting into the structure. So what I'm doing is bringing them much more into alignment with the licensing and credentialing department, working with Dr. Jane and everybody on that team of staff members to create a much more comprehensive way of supporting our communities in the field. And we're reorganizing the staff, at least that's what we believe we're doing right now, instead of having them all specialized in a certain area of responsibility, to actually being generalized and working with regions of the country. So that they'll have a one go-to person at LNC, and as well as one person to go to as a colleague in the field as a regional support coordinator. So this is underway right now, and our plan is to have this totally functional and tested by the first of the year or the end of the year, whichever way you want to look at it, so that as a new field leader comes in, they'll have the responsibility of a Department of Field Support, which is kind of the point of the position. So it'll help really focus into that work. And I'm very excited about the potential for this because I think we underutilize our RSCs right now. And they can play a bigger role in supporting our communities through their challenges, and to be there to celebrate with them when things are going well.
Great, thank you. So what do you think are the biggest opportunities over the next 3 years for our new field leader as they step in?
Biggest opportunities to me always are about expanding our field of member communities and ministers and practitioners, and our lay leaders who are essential to the whole mix. I think what's going to become the focus over the next few years is how do we expand our spiritual communities, establishing new kinds. We came up with this idea of virtual ministries, but I keep hearing, especially from our younger ministers, that there are going to be new ways to do spiritual community that we haven't really fully figured out yet. So I think that the field leader will be involved in helping us look at that. You know, and we know there are other ways. We know there are potentials on campuses. There are potentials in prisons. There are all kinds of possibilities for how we as a spiritual movement can be more impactful in the lives of thousands and thousands of people. We just need to figure out how to do that and how to resource that into the world. So I think that'll be a big part of what the field leader does. And the other big piece is always about how we expand our educational opportunities. It's been slow. That's one of the things that people said was going to be the hardest. And you know what? They were right. To reestablish our educational structure, our curricula and such is a big job. It's an amazingly big job. And I think the field leader will play an important role in helping to bring that forward. It feels almost like we're in a no man's land with our education right now. It's not as robust and exciting as we know it can be. But behind the scenes, we have dozens and dozens of people working diligently to create this new way of teaching science of mind and bringing it to the world. And that's what I think is the greatest opportunity we have. So I think the field leader will play an important role in that.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, what do you think of the biggest challenges that someone might be facing over the next 3 years, if you are in your crystal ball of it?
Oh, I don't need a crystal ball.
Not affirming
No,
anything.
I can tell you what has been the challenge all along, and we haven't overcome it yet. It's money. When we started CSL, we had two separate organizations that had a certain level of cash flow and income, and we imagined they would come together and that number would stabilize at that level combined, the addition of those two levels of income, and then it would grow. That's not what happened. We had different cultures that had to reestablish and figure out how do we support this organization, and it's been a challenge. One thing that we used to do, really in both organizations, was that from time to time, an individual would leave a bequest of a big bunch of money. And what would inevitably happen in almost every case was it would go into the general fund, and it would prop everything up. And everyone would go, yay, look how we're doing. We're doing great financially. We stopped that. We organized this thing called the Science of Mind Foundation. So when somebody leaves a large sum of money, most of that money now goes into the foundation so that it can be invested, and the interest from it can work in perpetuity to support our organization, which means we don't have those big gifts anymore. We have to function without them. They still come, and it's wonderful. It's amazing that often we find the work of receiving a bequest happened 20 years earlier, and the people that set it up aren't even around anymore. And then all of a sudden, a large sum of money comes in, and we all go, yay, and it goes into the foundation, and that's good. That's responsible. That's a mature thing to do, but it doesn't help your bottom line when you're trying to operate an organization. So that's something that's always been a challenge. Excuse me. Beyond that, we have seen a decline in income over the 5.5 years we've been doing this. It's not a major decline, but every year it's a little less than the year before. And we need to figure out how we support our field organization so our field organization feels really good about supporting the administration. And that's something that's still working. And I've been on the core council since it was conceived, and I've watched it. It's always been the issue. How are we going to fund this? How are we going to pay for this? How are we going to not have a deficit on our budget? These are the questions that always seem to come up and drive a lot of the decisions that are made within our organization. And it's kind of sad, but it is the reality of the day. We understand the teachings of prosperity. We can be very prosperous. I know that your community in Dallas is very prosperous. Our community in Asheville is very prosperous. But collectively, we're not all on that same level. And that's something that we've really got to continue to address and find ways to address so that we can turn our financial standing around so that we can fund the programs that we so much want to fund, and so that we can bring the resources to our field organization in a big way. That's the challenge. And a field leader is going to be involved in facing that challenge and making it work.
Great. Yeah. Well, I have thoughts on that. So
I'll bet you do.
All right. So, how do you feel? Last question I've got for you, and I so appreciate it, Dr. John. How has serving as the field leader, again using the term field leader, benefited CSL as a whole and the communities of CSL? How does this position really serve
That's a good
the
question.
larger and the individualized expressions of the organization?
I think, and coming from holding the position, this is an easy place to be. I think that the field leader has an enormous responsibility to the success of this movement, because the movement, I believe, is those hundreds of member communities out in the field doing the work. That's who we are. We have a home office that is administrative and does certain things to support the field and to provide publishing and do the other tasks that they do. All of that is very important. But without our 400 communities, what would be the point? So the frontline people are, to me, are essential to the success of bringing science of mind to the world. We'll find new ways to do that, but the work of the field leader is to represent them and to support them and to provide opportunities for their success again and again and again. So I think that is incredibly important within the organization, and that really falls to the field leader. Now, the Leadership Council has the same kind of mandate, and the Leadership Council, although the chair is very involved on an ongoing basis, and I'm sure that we're in the prayers of every member of the council every day, and they're thinking about it and all, but the activity of the field leader is to get in there, down in the weeds with the people that are doing it every day and represent the field, so that that perspective is always present, so that no one loses track of the importance of the field, and so there's no sense of us and them. There's simply us doing the work. And I think that's what the field leader brings. And, you know, there are always opportunities to come up with a new program or to enhance a program or to go and speak somewhere, or support a community, which I do pretty regularly. But really the work is representing the whole as much as possible all the time.
Great. Thank you. So if you know, you're talking to, there's a very good chance right now you're talking to as many colleagues as you possibly could that may be interested in this position, that actually may not have even considered being interested in this position, or they're not interested in this position, but that could change, or they know someone that ought to be. So what would you like to say to them in this moment?
The way it's designed right now, this is not for someone who is the primary spiritual leader of a community without a lot of support. I have the blessing of the support of my wife and co-minister, Barbara Waterhouse. And Dr. Barbara does a great job. Our community has thrived during the time that I've been in service to our international organization. But you have to have that. You have to have someone that you can rely on to pick up the slack, because you're just not there all the time. If that's not the case, the other is be someone who can serve full time. And you don't, I think you don't have to. In fact, I think it might be, I still believe it might be a challenge to live in Golden or the Denver area and make this your primary everyday thing. You've got to keep that perspective of the field, but being available to be there on an ongoing basis or a regular basis, at least monthly, I think is essential to doing the work. So you've got to have support. If you're in a ministry right now, you've got to have support of others to pick up the slack to do this work, or you've got to have the freedom of not having a pulpit that you fill or a letter of call right now, so that you can do this work. And honestly, I believe that it's going to expand back into full time. That's not where it is right now, but it has that potential.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so is your heart, as you think about, you know, you will have a swan song soon.
Yes.
I can get it out of my mouth.
February.
So, right, when you think about that, and imagine yourself standing there at that moment in time, is it something that you're just really grateful that you did? And anything you want to say about that to inspire someone to want to take the baton from you and fly as well?
Sure. It's extraordinarily rewarding. Being able to serve this organization, its ministers, its practitioners, is a labor of love. They're such good people out there doing the work. And when they're struggling, it's good to be there to help lift them up. And when they're celebrating their successes, it's wonderful to share that with them. There's no bad side to that. Every part of it is important. I mean, there are hard sides of the job. I've actually had the need to pull 3 licenses in 5 years. That was really hard. There are people that rose to the level of having a license, and I had to tell them that they couldn't do that anymore. It was one of the hardest things I had to do. And the politics has not been fun. but that comes and goes.
Mm-hmm.
So there are challenges always, but the blessing of serving people who believe in the science of mind, who live by it, who seek to bring it more fully to the world, it is the most glorious thing I know. So, you know, I think having this job has been far, far more a blessing than a challenge.
Great, thank you, Dr. John. And I have no doubt you'll be acknowledged and honored in February. And just to warm you up, I just want to say thank you from all of us here in the field, all that you've given, all that you've done, all the things you've done that we will never know that you have. And going above and beyond the call of this position, including paying for your expenses here come the end of this month, it sounds like, and just giving to this organization unabashedly as Spirit gives to itself. So thank you for that very, very much.
Thank you for your
and
words.
Thank you for your time, and thank you to every single minister that is in consideration in doing the discernment as to whether this is yours or not. And we know that,
yes, questions, any specific questions about this that they want to ask me privately, call me and I will hold who you are in confidence. I will not share that you have an interest. I've already had several that have shown an interest. So I'm available to anyone that wants to ask anything.
Great. Thank you for that. All right. And thank you all for watching and listening. We'll see you in Southern California in February. Bye for now.
Bye.